to the phone lines and bringing on Mike Waters, who always does a great job covering all things Syracuse basketball for Syracuse.com and the Post-Standard. Has done a great job breaking this very sad story today. And Mike, no easy place to start here. We appreciate you making some time for us. I guess take me back to the first time you met Lawrence Moten, or what you remember about a young Lawrence Moten when he was kind of an unheralded recruit from D.C.
Yeah, Tim, very sad day today. And I know for Syracuse fans of a certain vintage, the memories of Lawrence are still fresh, and the way he played, and people just remember the smoothness, the style, the grace. And that was really the way he conducted himself off the court, too. He was a sweet man with a gentle soul. Going back to my initial memories of him, he was kind of a curiosity when he first got here because he was a two-sport star in high school.
Yeah.
He had big-time schools recruiting him to play football. And he was, like you said, one of probably the most unheralded recruit in a large recruiting class that included guys like Lukey Jackson and Glenn Secunda and Anthony Harris. And I know I'm leaving a couple more names off of the list here. And then there was this two-sport guy from Washington, D.C. that Georgetown didn't really recruit until late, and how good could he really be if Georgetown wasn't all over him early on? And then he gets here, and you're like, you watched him play, and you weren't overly impressed. You had to really watch him all the time and see the little things, and then he was like I've talked to a bunch of people today, and they're like, yeah, you'd play and you'd get to the end of the game and think Lawrence didn't really do that much. And you look down and he's got 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals.
Right.
And, but because he didn't do it with high-flying dunks and stuff like that, not a lot of flash. He was smooth, which, the nickname Poetry and Moten just fit him to a T. But I also remember early on realizing that this unheralded recruit had a lot of self-belief. A lot of confidence in himself. He knew he belonged here as a freshman. And, it wasn't false bravado. It was just a steady sort of self-confidence in oneself that he knew he belonged. He was okay here, and that it's the kind of attitude that was one of the big reasons why he was able to see his way onto the court as a freshman, not only onto the court but into the starting lineup just 3 games into his college career.
Yeah. Speak a little bit more, Mike, to what he was like off the court and covering him, because just reading through the quotes today and everything, it just seems like, and I got a chance to meet him briefly once, and I can say the same thing, that he just always kind of had a smile on his face, and it was awesome to see he was always around Syracuse even after his playing days.
Off the court, loved working with kids. He worked with kids throughout the city of Syracuse and the school district and the boys and girls clubs. And one thing I always remember about Lawrence back during his playing days, whenever we interviewed him, especially if it was like after a bad game or a loss or something like that, in his distinctive high-pitched voice, he would always say, well, Mama always said, things happen for a reason. Things would happen for a reason. If a teammate got hurt and was going to be out of, things happen for a reason. So-and-so, somebody else is going to step up. This guy's going to play better. Or he always talked about his mom, and before she passed, he talked about his grandmother. And his mom, Lorraine Burgess was her name, was a driving force for him. Just a real steadying influence, and he relied on her heavily. And he would always set up a response with, like Mama always said, it was, things happen for a reason. And, and he again, it was so Lawrence that, to talk about his mom and like acknowledge her influence on him in that way. And, the other thing too is he was beloved by his teammates.
Yeah.
And even beyond his teammates, what gathered over the the years, and it's hitting home today, unfortunately, is he was close to guys who played before him that he never played with, that were former Syracuse players, when he got here, and he knew the guys that came after him as well. He just had just this amazing personality and just a way of really connecting with people, and everybody, whoever he met came away thinking that they had just met a great guy. So, he knew guys that played in the 80s. He respected guys that played in the 60s and 70s. He knew, about Dave Bing and Jimmy Lee. A lot of guys don't know the guys that come before them, and way before them. Maybe they know the guys that were here a year or two prior, but they don't know the guys that played a decade before them or 2 decades, but Lawrence did. And then he remained connected to the newer guys, too. I think that says a lot about a guy when he respects the others, and then he also just has the friendship and respect of everybody else.
Yeah, it says a lot about his game that he can be the all-time leading scorer at Syracuse, and of course had that record for all of the Big East for so many years, and Jim Boeheim saying he's one of the more underrated players he's ever seen in college basketball. I guess that goes back to what you were saying, though. Watching him play, it just seems like it was so effortless, and even though there was always production from him, you sometimes didn't realize it, right? Just how good he was each and every game.
No, he was just so consistent as well. He arrives as this freshman, and as you said before, and I agree with you, unheralded, especially compared to some of his. Anthony Harris was probably the highest rated recruit in the same class coming out of Connecticut. But, Lawrence gets here, boom, right off the bat, he averages 18 points a game as a freshman, or slightly over. Sophomore year, 18 points a game. Junior year, 21. Senior year backs off a little bit, 19 and a half, something like that. It's just he hit those numbers every single time, and he rose. He had great games. A lot of people remember his final game for a negative reason. An ill-fated timeout at the end of regulation in an NCAA tournament game against a highly favored Arkansas team, defending national champions. Calls a timeout Syracuse didn't have, and instead of winning in regulation, they go to overtime, and Arkansas outlasts them. But what people don't remember about that game is Lawrence scored 27 points in just 34 minutes.
Wow.
I mean, he had a great game, and he did that a lot. In his very first start as a Syracuse player, he helped them to a win over a nationally ranked Florida State team on the road in Atlanta. I think he scored 18, 19, 20 points, somewhere in that range. For a freshman in his third college game. But because he didn't hammer down incredible highlight dunks like a Hakeem Warwick, and they never quite got past. I think it was they never quite got past the Sweet 16 in any NCAA tournament during his career, that somehow he kind of gets overlooked. But, as far as the tournament success, what you have to remember about the time when Lawrence was here is, he arrives at Syracuse in the midst of an NCAA investigation, hurting the program. And then they missed the NCAA tournament. They had a 1-year probation in his sophomore year in '93. But the fact that he honored his commitment, he came and he stayed, guys like him and John Wallace, the fact that they, were here carried the program during a time when it would have been real easy to fall off completely. And it did, and they didn't. They did return to the tournament in both 1994 and 1995. And had some really good teams. And it took a lot to knock Syracuse out of the tournament during Lawrence's days. In fact, I know his junior and senior years both ended with overtime losses in the tournament. And, of course, right now as I walk around my office here, I'm struggling to remember his freshman year. But I know it was a loss to UMass. I don't think it was in overtime, but it was tough.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough day, Mike. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and chatting about him and paying tribute to him. I know But this is a really tough one for everyone in the Syracuse community. And like you said, such a meaningful player and such a great person off the court as well. So we've got a lot of other callers that want to pay tribute, so we'll let you go. But thanks for spending some time with us, Mike.
Well, absolutely. To talk about Lawrence is a privilege on a day like today. It's a real gut punch for everybody that knew him, and to go at so suddenly in an unexpected way at such a young age. It's tragic, but we won't forget Lawrence Moten around these parts for a long, long time.
Yeah, very well said by Mike Waters of Syracuse.com and the Post-Standard. Great to get his perspective on covering a young Lawrence Moten who has unfortunately passed away today at the age of 53.